Hello everyone! It's an extremely windy day. I still went outside and did some plein air, even though it was so windy. It was a little dangerous trying to keep your eyes open without getting dirt in your face. I went to the park, and it's a nice park that has an area where we can sit on these stone tables, cement tables. In any case, I brought my water-soluble graphite. I have the tin, I have the pencils, and I have the stick. And this was eye-opening. Basically, I discovered I really like the stick. Usually the tin, I use it more like watercolors, and I am okay with the pencils. The only thing with the pencils is I get too tight. I get bogged down into the details, and I get too tight. The pencil was a good idea just to get a sense of the composition, where the pieces were gonna go. But then when I started putting in the branches, that's when I feel everything went to hell, which is fairly early on in the drawing, and things got better afterwards when I got into using the stick. But at the beginning, I was in the details, trying to follow where the branches went. You're gonna get overwhelmed by the branches. That's definitely gonna happen. It has more branches than the patience that I have to draw. Especially when I'm outside doing plein air, I don't want to get down into super realism and details. I want to get a sense of a tree, and unfortunately, I start doing branch by branch, and that's problematic. I do need to worry about which branches will go in the front, which ones go in the back, and also they curve, and sometimes depending on the light, you don't see necessarily which one is in front of the other. Is it coming towards you? Is it going backwards into the scene? Is it going sideways? And they curve a lot, so there's a lot of sometimes guesswork until the light hits it just right, and then you really see, this is the direction that branch was actually going in. I basically did half the tree before I realized this is not going to work. I need to change my approach, and that's what I did. So this is where I grabbed the stick and I started getting really into it, because then the branches started making a lot more sense. And again, when you follow lines and you use a stick, you don't hold it the same way as you do a pencil. You hold it the way I'm holding it now, which is in a much more loose manner, and I'm not using my wrist. I am using my whole arm and my shoulder to be able to trace with the stick, as opposed to getting bogged down with the details. Now I'm using the Khadi paper sketchbook. I've had this sketchbook since maybe December of 2021. I got two. I got the rough paper and the smooth paper one. The rough paper, this one is not that rough. I think it's somewhat akin to cold press, and I have the smooth one, and the smooth one is more like hot press. I'll say that I didn't know what to use this sketchbook for. I usually make my own sketchbooks when it comes to watercolor and wet medium type of sketchbooks. Dry sketchbooks I buy, but watercolor type sketchbooks I make myself, usually from Fabriano paper or Arches paper. I saw videos from this YouTube artist. I think his name is Andrew Barrowman, and he has a YouTube channel, and he has a few sketchbook flip throughs, and he's a UK artist, and he does a lot of plein air. He was showing what he was doing with this Khadi sketchbook, and he had a lot of sketches with liquid charcoal, and I like liquid charcoal. I started using liquid charcoal last year. I used it mostly in a concertina when I went outside in plein air. A concertina I made myself with, I think it was Fabriano paper, but I thought, oh, that would be great. I'll have a monochromatic wet media sketchbook, and I'll use my water-soluble graphite, and I'll use my liquid charcoal. I will say, one thing I discovered, when I use this pan for water-soluble graphite, I use it more like watercolor. So I control the amount of water ratio with pigment. So I know how to make it light and how to get darker values. I know how to it's not exactly like watercolor. It doesn't layer quite as easily. Water soluble graphite is not at all like watercolors. It doesn't act like watercolors. It sediments a lot, so you can't really control the medium as much, which is interesting because it's sediment. If you put too much water, it doesn't mean it's gonna flow. Some is gonna flow, very little is gonna flow, everything else is just gonna go to the bottom and rest on the page. It's a very different type of control, but I've used it a few times. I know how to use it. When I used the stick, what I discovered was when I put down the brush, oh my, how dark it went and fast, because it activated all the graphite. And even though it looked very light, the moment I put water on it, it got extremely dark, extremely fast. What I discovered was if I wanted to put highlights in, I had to go back, let it dry, go back with my dry graphite. Because of the grain, it let a lot of the paper through. That ended up being more like a highlight. I would think that the next time I would try to keep it lighter, that I might use a dry brush technique, which I wasn't able to do here because as I was learning, I didn't have control, and at that point I just wanted to get a sense of how can I finish this tree with the marks I've already made. The thing with water soluble graphite is that the moment you activate it with water, it's not going to lift and erase as well. When it's dry, if you haven't activated yet, then it will fairly easily. But the moment you wet it, even if you let it dry, it's not going to lift the same. A few more things before I go. You'll notice I use some paper clips. The clips that I use have magnets. So because the pan is metal, I am able to use the pan on the magnet, and the cap is used as basically my water source mixture area. You'll also notice I have travel brushes. I use my Escoda Reserva travel brushes. They're Kolinsky Sable. I think they're red sable. And they are gorgeous. The fact is, I almost always use my size 10 or 12 because they come to such a fine point. In any case, all the materials that I use will be in the description with links. Some of them might be affiliates. It doesn't cost you anything. It just gives me a commission in case you use the links. And that simply will go to more art materials because I have an issue with art materials. I really like them. I hope you enjoyed it today. Do you do water soluble graphite? Do you have any tricks or any tips? Do you use it for plein air? And if you do, what's your setup? I'm curious to see what other people do because I haven't seen a lot of videos of people using water soluble graphite for plein air, and I would love to learn more. In any case, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I would be more than happy to respond. See you next time. Ciao! Hold on to your hats, folks. It's getting so windy!